G'day, folks. AoS Coach here, and I have the new Skaven book. Yes, we are previewing all things Skaven 4th edition. I am joined by a man who has long been on my VIP list, and it's been an absolute war crime to the Council of 13 that I haven't invited him onto the channel yet. It is Matt Beasley. Matt has been a very competitive, successful wargamer for a long period of time. Top performer, Team America. You are representing Dimensional Cascade. You do really well on the West Coast. You recently went 4-1 with Skaven at Oldtown Throwdown, which has been the largest Age of Sigmar 4th edition event yet. And I couldn't think of a better person to help me get into the good cheese, find all the holes, and work out what's going on. Got new units, we've got new rules, we've had some changes. What's good? How do I think about this book? And maybe just a caveat before I introduce Matt and get Matt to speak. One thing that you need to know about this preview, folks, is that there is no points in this document. So you'll scroll through it. There's lots of cool things. There's armies of renown and regiments of renown. There's Path to Glory, lots of great, match play stuff and lore. But what's missing is the points. So in this discussion, we're not going to talk about points. I can only assume that's going to go up onto Warcom probably after it hits the shelf. So you'll have a pre-order window. I don't know just yet, but just know that very, very soon there'll be points. I just can't tell you because I don't know what it is. So we're going to make some wild guesses on some of the new heroes and things like that, but take it with a grain of salt. We're just not going to know until Warcom drops. But anyway, there's my opening context. Matt, g'day, welcome, introduce yourself, and tell me about Skaven in 4th edition so far.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really good to be on, and I think it's going to be great. Great introduction. I don't have a lot to add. But I can talk a little bit about my experience with Skaven so far. I think that Skaven is really appealing as a book right now, as an index, because it has all the different components of the game. It's got recursion, it has casting, it has prayers, it has movement shenanigans, it has combat, it has shooting. Like there's no part of the game where it doesn't participate. And that allows you to build a really well-rounded, really diverse, really toolboxy list, which is what I find appealing about it. And so when you look at the index, I think that I know that the win rate of the index is really low right now. You probably just see like meta stats on it. And I think that like sometimes you say like, oh, it's a rules issue, is it a points issue? I think it's like purely a points issue because all the rules for like a varied, well-rounded toolboxy force is there. It's all very solvable by these 3 months releases. And so at some point when that gets right, it's going to be a really fun book that's also a good place.
I think the other thing as well is, a complex book like this does take time for the community to work out. You look at some of the armies right now doing really well. It's all spam, Varangard spam, Dawn Rider spam, Nighthaunt spam. But Skaven is a book that you can spam like your Storm Fiends and your Rat Ogres. But I think Skaven has done best when you have a diverse mixture. You've got a Vermin Lord here, you've got a Master Molder here, you've got your Hellpit Abomination, you've got Doom Wheels. Like you have a mixture of things. And that mixture, like cities, like Stormcast, it's those armies that don't have a really strong win percentage right now because they're all still trying to work out what's best right now. So I still think Skaven's really good. It's just going to take the community that little bit more time. And we might have got some friendly helpers like our new prophet of the Horned Rat, which I'm excited to show you the rules for. Because I know one of the things in my initial preview with the faction pack was they didn't like their priest being locked to the priest on, like the pestilence priest, like on a bell, not a bell, you know what I'm talking about, plague furnace. Yeah. The plague furnace, like they're like, where's the little one? Well, we've got some things. But before I get into the rules, and I'm sure everyone on the video is like, just get to the rules. What's your favorite thing about Skaven so far? What's the thing that you've enjoyed in 4th edition the most?
Oh, the opponent hero phase move. And then my second favorite is coming into play in the end of the opponent's movement phase. No question.
I know when we did the faction pack discussion with my friend Bruce, how many times his bloody Hell Pit Abomination comes back to life. I don't know if his dice are cooked or it's just what Hell Pit Abominations do, but the amount of times they die, they come back, they heal up, and I'm like, why did I bother? Like, why did I bother with this stupid thing? And he's like, oh, I should run 3. I'm like, no, please don't. But Skaven's a lot of fun. Like, honestly, Skaven is so much fun. All right, I'm going to stop laughing my backside off and get into the structure. So there's a lot of things we're going to talk about here, and we're going to see how we go with time. There's probably the way we're going to break it up is first thing is what has changed across the board. And I have retyped everything. So be kind on me if I've had a misspelling or if there's something that doesn't look 100% right. I've literally retyped everything, including War Scrolls. I'm going to share with you what's changed so far, and then we'll go into the new War Scrolls. There are 2 Armies of Renown, which I'll show you in a second, which is really exciting. So maybe if you want to think of a different way of playing with your Skaven, you can have a look and see if this is for you. But I'm going to read these through maybe line by line, and I'll get Matt to provide some initial commentary if he happens to have them. So what have I noticed so far? You've gained 2 Armies of Renown. Let's pause that. I'll talk about that when we bring up the rules. For those people watching this video, if you like Skaven but don't play Skaven, there is 2 regiments of Renown, so you can bring in those quote-unquote allies into your other Chaos forces. So there's something for you in the book as well if you want to run some Skaven and not play Skaven. We'll pause that one. First major change that I noticed was that Warp Gale has gone down from a casting value from a 7 to a 6. Little easier. Matt, any thoughts from you?
I think it's actually oddly a big deal because Skaven has a lot of incidental casting pieces. The Bell is a double caster. Your Vermin Lords are a single caster. Like if you look at a Warbringer, you're not taking it because it's a caster, but it happens to be a caster. And by going from a 7 to a 6, you're increasing that success percentage by like 1 in 6 total, right? Because there's like 6 ways to get to a 7. Sorry, is that right? Either way, it's going up meaningfully, and it's going up meaningfully for those sort of +0 casters. It's a really big debuff when it resolves. It also means it's easier to resolve as a countercast. Warpgale is the current turn only. It's not until your next hero phase, which means in order to get it to stick during your opponent's turn, you have to countercast it, and so reducing the cast value is pretty meaningful there.
Yeah, it's a good call. It's a really good call. It means you're less reliant as well on places of power. There's obviously it's a good thing overall. Like from 7 to a 6 just means you're more likelihood. I love your call out on the magical intervention. The second thing that I'll call out is from like an allegiance point of view, and I think this is a big one, is that your unlimited spell in the faction pack used to be Wither, which is a really good spell. It's now changed to Skitterleap. Thoughts?
Yeah. I actually like this better for a couple reasons. So I don't think Skaven is taking a massive volume of casts most of the time. I think you're going to have maybe, if you have 2 casters, so the unlimited spell is meaningful, you're going to have like a main caster and an incidental caster. If that's your situation, being able to teleport 2 heroes, it has like edge case utility for tactic denial, where usually you're not using. I don't think I ever would have wanted to have used Wither twice yet, because you're competing against manifestations and ASL with pretty limited cast slots. But yeah, Skitterleap, like your opponent has to know that in any given turn you could teleport multiple heroes.
Yeah, I like this as a change. Like, yes, for the people who are spamming Wither, I'm sorry, but it's a limited short range, 13 inches. Yeah, it's D3, you can roll a 1. I always value the mobility, and it just gives you more flexibility when you think of your gnaw holes, you think of some of the other movement shenanigans. This is beautiful. Yeah. I think Skitterleap just puts your opponent on edge.
And I guess, so I should say, when I say cast tactics now, we're normally thinking about that like magical intervention. And I think what I mean there is like, sometimes you just need to move your whole army out of a zone because you know the options your opponent has next turn. So, but again, it's very edge case. I don't think this is a huge deal either way.
No, but definitely for those people who are spamming Wither, you're going to lose some damage. But Skaven, I don't think, is lacking damage. Like, there's so much damage output that if you need it, it's already there. Like, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be one person in the comment that'll tell me differently. There's been a bunch of other changes. I might just read out all the changes and then I'll ask you which one's more impactful. So Arch Warlock has lost some attacks with the Warpfire Gauntlet, and the hit and the wound profile has now flipped. You've gained a new Piston Claw melee attack, which is 2 attacks, hits on a 4, wounds on a 2, Rend 2 for D2 damage 2. Sorry, not. I see a D and I immediately think D3. I'm like, there's no D2. And then you have this to me is probably the bigger change, is that the free covering fire basically has no penalty now. So not a bad little ability. You've got your Acolyte Globadiers, which has gained a champion. No other changes that I had noticed. You have Jezzails, who interesting change. So they've lost 6 inches on their range characteristics. So they used to be 24 down to 18. But if they don't move, they gain the plus 6 inches. So if they move, they're at 18 inches. If they don't move, they're 24 inches. And that plus 6 inches has replaced the +1 to hit if they didn't move. So they've lost that. Hope you're all following. Doomflayers, we noticed that the movement characteristics change from it's now 2d6 plus 3 rather than 1d6 plus 8. A big one, in my opinion, is the return of the Plaguepack. Now, that used to be a Underworlds warband. It was a named unique warband. I can't remember the hero's name. It's unlegend. And it's no longer unique. So it doesn't have a hero attached, although it does have a priest in it, but it's no longer a unique thing, so you can reinforce it. Well, I'll bring up the rules in this video. Finally, the Master Molder has gained some things. So it's gained a shooting attack, so 10-inch range, D6 attacks, hits on 4s, wounds on 2s, Rend 2, 1 damage, and it can shoot in combat. And there's been a change now where you add 1 to the charge roll instead of 2 when you're using the Packmaster ability.
Yeah.
Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, I think a lot of these are meaningful. The Warlock, I don't think the melee on the Warlock it's probably a problem if that's particularly meaningful. The covering fire going to no penalty, going from no penalty to no CP is, I think, a really big buff.
Huge.
You're talking about
buff.
Oh, I think it's a buff because, well, okay, so for a couple of reasons. So if you're thinking about what you're covering firing with in Skaven, you're either hitting it with Jezzails, which auto wound on 6s, or the new a new unit we'll get to, which crit hits on 6s and has a good hit roll. And so for the Jezzails, you're losing, some damage output, but not a ton by going from 4s to 5s, because if you have a reinforced unit of Jezzails, you got 2 6s, 2 5s, and 2 4s. The 6s are auto converting. You're losing like 1 1/3 worth of the wounds. And then for the other unit, you'll see it's not a huge impact on the damage output, but Skaven is incredibly command point strapped. Remember that you're recurring a unit. That's a CP. You're usually covering firing. You're usually combining the redeploy with the opponent's hero phase move. Not to mention your basic wanting to use all attack and all defense. And you usually want either magical intervention or you want to counter prayer, especially because now you have someone you will want to counter prayer with, or you might want to do both. So it's so CP strapped that this is sort of 50 points a turn, right, from being able to get a free CP a turn. And so I think this is it's like an argument to take the Warlock, where before I don't think it was ever worth the hero slot in points.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I know some people building around that reinforced unit of Jezzails and they will be unhappy with that. But then on the flip side, to your point, the amount of times, because Skaven is so CP hungry, especially regenerating that unit at the end of the turn, you want that CP. So by getting the extra CP and not spending it on cover fire is a benefit. It's probably an overall benefit, a minor reduction to Jezzail's, but overall it's probably, you don't think it's that big of a deal?
I think it's a buff to Jezzail's, like, because I have never played Skaven without a reinforced unit of Jezzail's. I think they sort of carry the army right now, and it reduces your resource investment in that piece of the army.
I'll agree with that. I guess when you combine it with the Jezzail's, though, losing the +1 to hit as well, that buff's now gone because of the extension of the range. I guess you're not hitting as often, but to your point, probably maybe not as big of a deal as someone might read into.
Well, they also, here's the thing, they lost the +1. They don't get the +1 to hit and covering fire anyway, because it was your turn only. Usually they're going to be the +1 to hit and wound from a general's reg. Like, that's often what you're targeting. And so then if you're getting -1 from covering fire, you're going back to 4s and 2s, but it's not costing you a CP. And so I think it's a good change. I think you're right that some people will be like, oh, my Jezzail's got nerfed from this. I think the range nerf to Jezzail's is a big nerf. It's probably the biggest change in this list. But the actual Arch Warlock change makes me like interested in the unit, where before I kind of dismissed it.
I'll agree with you on that one. I think it also, you brought up an interesting point, because I'm looking at this not necessarily in this current General's Handbook, but yes, right now you might think of changing your heroes regiment to be the Jezzail rather than going for the extra rend to mitigate the +1 to hit, +1 to wound. So if you are investing in Jezzail's, go that like the Stormcaster using the long strikes in the +1 to hit, +1 to wound boost. It might just move us closer to that rather than what I've seen where people are putting Rat Ogres or Storm Vermin or Storm Fiends getting the +1 rend. So it might change your, I guess, what your focus might be.
So that's it. So to keep going, Jezzail's losing 6 inches. Yeah, they keep it if they don't move. It's a huge deal, because a lot of the power in Jezzail's comes from popping through a gnaw and then being able to shoot. And doing that, and because you would prefer to be going second as sort of a control army, that means your gnaw is coming up before their movement phase happens, because if they're taking the top of the turn. So if the gnaw is going up before they take the top of the turn, and you have to place it in a place where they can't get rid of it, that loss of 6 inches range when popping around is really a big hit. And it also means your covering fire is 18 versus 24. One of the really great things about Jezzail's compared to most of the meta right now is that they have a uniquely long range covering fire. And so that sort of goes away. So this is a pretty meaningful nerf for them. Now, again, I think one unit of Jezzail's was completely auto-include before, and so now they probably do go down to just good.
And it might be worth calling out as well that even though the document here just says they don't move, it also does count the setup as well. So if you do teleport them through the Nahal, they also are not going to get the +6 inches. It's don't move or don't set up that turn.
Doomflayer move. This one is actually a bummer, because Doomflayers used to auto-complete take the flanks, because a 1 on a d6 is 9 and a run is a 1, which means you're always getting out of your opponent's zone with the d6 +8. And losing that means they're no longer a cheap way to take the flanks. So they lose that use case, which is a bummer. It doesn't make it all of a sudden a bad unit, but like, I took a Doomflayer and it was specifically because of that guaranteed move for various tactics. But it's probably a more stable value. I don't think it's a bad change for the game. It just happens to have a negative effect with the tactic pack.
Yeah, I'm doing the mental maths. Like, you've got a higher failure rate. Obviously, 2d6 can go as low as 2, and that 2 + 3 is 5, where 1d6 plus the 8 is still 9. So and really, like, even at max, right, 2d6 is 12, +3 is 15. 6 + 8 is 14. So at best, you gain an extra inch, but you have a higher failure rate.
Right. And it's not even about like the total normal move. I mean, Doomflayers are fast. It's really about, can you know that this will be qualifying you for the tactic? And now without spending the CP, or roughly don't.
Well, you've just got to now plan for the worst, right? Like at absolute worst, if you're going for take the flanks, you've got to assume this, or you've got to use a CP to run it because you can't rely on the failure rate.
Right. I just think you just don't take the unit for that anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Plaguepack.
Let's pause the Plaguepack because the War Scroll is in the document, so we'll get to that properly. Cool. Let's pause that one.
Sure, and then the Master Molder, I feel like this is probably a nerf. It's not a huge one, but you know, +2 to charge is a big deal. Change to +1. I haven't personally experimented much with the Master Molder, and so I don't know if he still becomes like a good choice, but it's definitely a big reduction, especially because you could go through a null and be 7 away, right? Effectively, now that's 8.
Yeah, from my experience, this is a minor nerf, but certainly not enough that I wouldn't take it because of the abilities, right? Like the Lord of Flesh grafting is why you probably take like this unit, like getting the heal 3 is primarily why you're taking it.
Got it.
Obviously, the +2 is nice, but still you're getting +1.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So we've had a lot of changes. Now I guess we'll talk about what's new. But before we do that, is there anything, as you think about list building in Skaven, right? Is there anything around like any commentary or advice or directions you'd give me to start thinking about and contextualizing what potentially the new, because we're all going to run to the new War Scrolls, like, oh my gosh, there's a new priest hero. There's going to be this, there's going to be that. Like, I'm so excited. But what's the advice and the direction when it comes to list building?
So I think Skaven as an army, I think the most important unit in the book is clan rats, and then any sort of substitute for clan rats. If you look at, and I'm just going to double check this, what can come back through a null hole? What can come back is Skaven infantry. And it's exclusively infantry units. And so that means all your war machines, all your monsters, and all your characters effectively are support utility pieces. Maybe they're DPS pieces, maybe they're doing a role, but in some ways they have to be protected in a way the rest of the army doesn't have to be protected because they don't get recursion. And so you're generally in a Skaven force going to be like, what is the mass of my force that I can hit with and have recursion on? And then what are the few specific pieces that do a role that's so valuable that I'm okay protecting them and not exposing them until a point where I don't care if they recur, or they'll do so much it's okay if they die. And so as you look at all these things, like, do they go into the bulk of your points, which is your units that can recur, your many, many rats, or do they go into your very limited slot of one time, this is a unique thing, how do I protect it? And so that becomes really important when you look at new units, because there is such a premium on anything that is not Skaven infantry in your list building.
Love that. And one thing as well is our new Prophet of the Horned Rat is a really good example where it's playing in a space that you've already got filled, right? So we have a pretty large Vermin Lord, which, is clashing with all the other Vermin Lords, the space of Thanquil. And, there's obviously a lot of things that comes here, right? So I'm going to give you a quick high level for those people who are listening to me on the train or something. So what have you got with Vizzik? I think it's Vizzik, right? So you've got no shooting attack. It's 10-inch move, 5 up save, control score of 5, 15 health, 2 weapon profiles, which are pretty tasty. Some crit mortals on that unholy North Staff, as well as some companion attacks, from the host of Vermin, which is okay. It's a War Master. It's a unique hero. It's a priest with a power level of 2, 5 up ward, master clan keyword, 4 key abilities that you'll want to know, and obviously you can read this if you're watching. So you've got the Death Frenzy, which is its spell. I had to double check that wasn't a spelling mistake, but no, the prayer. It's a prayer. Apologies. My mouth and my brain are not connected. It is a prayer with a chanting value of 8. That's right. It's a chanting value of 8. So the Death Frenzy, pick a visible enemy unit within 13 inches or a visible friendly Skaven infantry unit within 13. Make your chant roll. If you're successful, if you pick an enemy unit, you subtract 1 from the attack characteristic of the target's melee weapons. If you pick a friendly unit, you can use 2 fight abilities this turn. After the first one, it has strike last. If you happen to roll a 12 plus and you've been banking up your prayer dice, you can pick 2 units instead of 1. Matt, do you want to jump in at this particular point, or should I just continue? Do you have any thoughts coming up?
Yeah, I was going to wait till you're done. Either way is good. I can talk about.
Cool.
Let's just do the whole scroll. Yeah.
I'll power through the rest of it. You got the Gaze of the Nor, which is a rampage once per turn combat phase. Pick an enemy unit, roll a dice on a 2+. For the rest of the turn, if the unit is in combat with the target, when the target is picked to fight, the target must fight Vizzik. When it does, you'll be subtracting 1 from hit rolls and wound rolls for the combat attacks that turn. 2 other rules. You have the Frishers of in reality. Pick an enemy unit in combat to be the target. Roll a d3 on a 2+. Inflict an amount of mortal wounds equal to the roll. And finally, my favorite little ability, the Prophet of the Horned Rat. It is once per battle, though. You can re-roll a chanting roll for this unit until the start of your next turn.
Yeah, so let's start. So when I first saw this guy, I thought, man, this is absolutely amazing as like a melee debuff piece because of Gaze of the Maw. You know, putting, say, for example, whatever unit you want ringing around Vizzik 2.5 away and having someone charge into that and then be putting all their attacks from only their front rank into Vizzik and be at -1 to hit and wound. It's very, very, very powerful. The 2+, well, your opponent has to assume that you're going to roll that. And so you're still mitigating like what they want to do that way. The thing that I noticed late when looking at the War Scroll is that he's a War Master. What that means is because he will be in the General's Regiment, because he will be the General, that +1 to hit and wound, if it's on a critical enemy unit, mitigates his ability to be a defensive tank in a lot of ways, because they will bypass the -1/-1 if you're trying to use him as like something with a unit 2.5 behind. And so he's probably still good in that role, but you have to be much more careful with him because of that. Death Frenzy is great. Death Frenzy is very powerful because, for a couple of reasons. The strikes last is really situational. The problems with this kind of, the fight twice strikes last really situational with Skaven because the units are like paper thin, right? So you go in with 20 Storm Vermin, you wreck something. If you didn't wreck it, you're probably dead. But it's a modular prayer, and there are use cases where strikes twice with fight last is amazing on Storm Vermin, where you've killed the first line, and the strikes last lets you pile in and go into the second line. Because it's a modular prayer, you're picking between that ability and something that is more universally useful, which is the attacks debuff. I think the chant value of 8 is probably fine. It's high, but like I think that when you do this, you're adding a completely different dimension to the army. And so I think it's probably worth it. Prophet of the Horned Rat really helps mitigate that, because since it's beginning of the next turn, or beginning of your next turn, that means you're getting that with 2 prayers, 3 prayers, and then maybe 4 prayers if you're, say, counter praying into a double. The nice thing is, because prayers build up now, you don't have to like you see, oh, you can only do it once, and it's not like a reaction to when you've already prayed. But in some ways, it doesn't matter that much, because prayer points build, and so there's no like, oh no, I'll keep the perfect healing potion and never use it. You can just use it to build points better. And so I think that really mitigates the high chanting value of Death Frenzy.
Yeah, it's a nice little ability, because you, as a priest too, you would, I assume what you're doing is you're putting both of your priest dice into Death Frenzy, essentially, right? Because you could go, and I guess this is where some of the funny little games come in, right? Let's say hypothetically you do Filth Crust, chanting value of 4. Let's say I roll a 4 or a 3, or it doesn't matter what I roll, right? But I don't cash it in.
Right.
I bank that dice. Then I do the Death Frenzy second. I then hit my chant value of 8. I get it off. So even though he's chant 2, should you have banked something up for a magical intervention or sitting on, like some type of buff, and you happen to spike, you can always do it first. But really, I imagine you're doing Filth Crust, Bile Torrent, or Rabid Tough first, banking the dice. If you fail it, who cares? Just move along. And then it's almost like you're almost doing Death Frenzy once a turn.
Yeah. The other thing to notice, like you see the red 1 and the 4 to hit on the Gnaw staff, and like it's like, it's kind of a mediocre monster. The one thing to notice is he has 6 attacks that do d6 damage and it's crit mortal, which means on average, you are doing d6 mortals in addition to the other hits, right? The other hits are in some ways kind of gravy. You're doing d6 mortals plus the d3 on the 2-up. And so if you're hitting the d3 on the 2-up, at any given target, you're probably doing 5-6 mortals, and then all your incidental damage. It's not a bad amount of damage.
So I guess the question is, and again, we don't know points, so I'm going to guess it's probably Vermin Lord price, maybe a little higher given that it's War Master and it's a double priest, and getting a tanky priest is something that I know when I did the faction pack discussions, it's something that keeps coming up. Like, we want a better version of a priest. Well, you've got it. Ballpark, I don't know, 430 to 470, edging to 500, hypothetically. Is it auto include? Would you take it? Is it a situational thing? Like, how do you think of Vizzik?
I don't think he's auto include. I do think he seems very good. I think some of it will depend on the meta around it. Vizzik needs to generally be like, he doesn't have stuff that hugely benefits from being back, and to get his full value, you need him to be in combat. Right now, you have stuff in the meta that's very good, like Ruse, that remove ward saves. And so when you have, and you also have, the really dominant +1 to hit and wound. And so there are particular elements of the game right now that you will commonly run into that he is vulnerable to, and I think that makes him not quite an auto-include. But I'm definitely going to play with him, and I definitely think he's very cool. Certainly not a bad piece, but I don't think broken. I don't think you're going to see him in every list. I think you'll see him in a lot.
And he's not as tanky as he possibly is. It's a shame that Rabid Tough won't work. Like, I was just looking at the prayer rule. I'm like, maybe Rabid Tough will make it a -2. So even then, if there's a +1, +1, the -2 would then bring it back into line. But unfortunately, Rabid Tough, don't at me into the chat, folks. Rabid Tough, I know, is for infantry, so you can't use Vizzik on it, which you just got to watch out for those priority targets, basically. But I like the War Scroll. Assuming where it lands on points will obviously ultimately depend, but is it the most killy Vermin Lord? No. But is it giving you new tools? Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's not killy. 66 is a pretty good, like, its damage range is very, I'm comparing it to like the Warbringer. The Warbringer is 7 damage 3 attacks. This is 6 damage 3.5 attacks. It's just lower rend. So I think it's a solid combat piece as well. It's weird because I think that Gnaw row looks worse than it is because you see the rend 1 and you see the hit on 4s, but I think that's a pretty good attack profile.
And I see damage as 1. Again, I always think of the failure point, but like when you compare it to like a Deceiver or a Warbringer or a Warp Seer where you've got 6 attacks, rend 2, damage 3, you've got the consistency there. But what this brings is the prayers. It gives the debuffs, and
it's also fast, right? It's the same speed as a Vermin Lord, right? And it doesn't necessarily like, your large utility support pieces move 10, which is pretty good.
Any final comments about our Prophet of the Horned Rat?
I think we covered it. That's good.
Cool. All right. Next up is the Plague Priest that I kindly asked, the Plague Priest, the Plague Pack, although technically I'm kind of right still. So the Plague Pack is our legend unit. It's back, no longer unique. which it also means you can reinforce it, which is really neat as well. I was one of the concerns that I had, because some of those Underworld's warbands will have you can't reinforce them, but the language here, obviously, again, wait for the pitch battle profile, but this language tells me I can reinforce it by the looks of it. Anyway, Plaguepack has 2 weapons. You've got the Weapons of Corruption. You have the Plague Sensor in there. You can read the War Scroll. Move 6, save 1. Save 6. Sorry, move 6, save 6, control 1, health 2. You've got a Priest in there, which is neat. You've got a Champion in there. 2 key abilities. You've got subtract 1 from hit rolls for shooting attacks that target this unit. You've also got the Plague Rat, where basically it's a token, like a lot of these units now are turning those little companions into tokens. And basically, if you make a chant roll of 1, you remove the Plague Rat, and then you can recast or re-roll that chant. Yeah. So you've got a nice little priest unit.
Yeah, I think it's cool because it's a priest that recurs. It's cool because it's 5 models, and so that means you can string it fully out, and it covers a reasonable amount of space. It's nice that the prey is relatively reliable. And I think you would get the Plague Rat back if you recur it, and so you get a second usage of that if you recur it. And so to me, this is a cool chaff piece, because you don't care if it dies, right? Like if it dies, it comes back, it's still a priest. And so I think it's sort of, I mean, to me, it reads kind of like a budget Gobblepalooza in that way, where like you've got a unit that can do something usually reserved for characters that you can recur when it dies, and so you can use it in an expendable way.
And you've basically got a priest with a few extra wounds, right? You got a priest who can take damage, and you're not going to get the Lookout Sir or Guarded Hero abilities, but you generally have a more durable unit.
Yeah, I think I see people use them and I really think like the direct analog is Gobblepalooza, right? And if you think about when Gobblepalooza was first out, you were seeing it behind the lines of goblins, and then by the end, it's like it's in front because it's like 15 wounds on a 4-up, right? This is 10 wounds, but I think yes, it's a priest with more wounds. I mean, in some ways, it's a priest with 16 wounds, and when the first 10 go, you get a reset, and that's very cool.
No, 10. There's 5 models in the unit.
Right, but then it dies and it comes back with 3 models.
Oh, you're thinking the recursion as well.
Yeah, the recursion basically, like I'm kind of happy if you put 10 damage into it, because when you say you kill 20 Stormvermin and I get 10 back, you reduce the effectiveness of the unit by half. If you kill 5 Plaguepack and I get 3 back, it doesn't do anything to the effectiveness of the unit, because it doesn't do any melee anyway. It's there to be a priest.
Do you like it? Do you like
because of that dynamic? It fills a role of chaff that you are completely okay with dying.
Yeah, and I know people were upset that the Plague Priest in the past, that little infantry hero, is no longer in the book. This kind of brings it back with some extra stuff. Obviously, there's no ward like the Gobblepalooza, but it's still got some great stuff. It's a good little, again, how much points is a unit priest going to cost us? Who knows? But I would definitely consider this if I wasn't taking the horned Vizzik. If I'm not taking Vizzik.
Yeah, I think this is going to hit what a lot of the Skaven units hit, which is this is a cool rule set that does something that's worth having. And the question is, do the points make it worth it?
But we don't mind it right now. It's basically the thing. But obviously, points might blow it out of proportion. Points might just let's spam the crap out of it. Who knows where we land?
Right.
This one is one that I've really been interested in. Krittok, the Foulblade, and has some very interesting rules. So it's a War Master and it's unique. So super interesting Verminous hero. Move 6, save 4, control 2, health 6. What makes me really interested, so it does have a range and a melee attack. Shooting's profile nice, 10-inch range, 2 attacks, hits on 3s, wounds on 3s, Ren 2 for D3. The Doom Fang is quite nice, the 5 attacks, 3s, 2 for 2 damage, crit mortals. But then you've got an ability, which I love, called the Doom Fang. Who saw that coming? In any combat phase, this unit has strike first, but it can't use commands this phase. So you'll be hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s. You've got 2 other abilities. You have a Reputation for Cunning, which is going to cost you 1 command point in the enemy hero phase. And you can pick 2 different eligible units to use the Always 3 Claw Steps Ahead ability, the movement ability, instead of 1. But one of those units has to be a Verminous unit. And then finally, you've got the Fostering Competition. So add 1 to wound rolls for friendly storm vermin units while they're wholly within 13 inches of Krittok.
Yeah.
War Scroll, talk to me.
There's a lot going on. I think a Reputation for Cunning looks absolutely amazing, but it's a command point. And like we talked about earlier, you have a very tight command point economy. One of them having to be Verminous doesn't matter. Clan Rats are Verminous. The chance that you're not moving 1 unit of Storm Vermin or 1 unit of Clan Rats when you're moving 2 feels unlikely. I think the add 1 to wound rolls for Storm Vermin becomes marginal with 1 unit and maybe worth it with 2. They are 3s and 4s, buckets of dice. Like when you're running 2 units, that's a pretty substantial part of your army that has a DPS buff. I think one of the important things about this unit is that you may see him with Vizzik, specifically because since he is also a War Master, he is a way to not make Vizzik your general. And so then using Vizzik as a tanking piece becomes more feasible. And you could still put the Storm Vermin if you don't want them in your general's regiment with Vizzik. So then it restricts what could be in your general's regiment. For example, I'm guessing he probably can't take Jezzail's. Yeah, he is a way to make Vizzik tankier effectively by making him not your general.
Probably the same question I've asked you a few times. By the way, I really like it. The problem is that you have too many good small heroes.
Yeah.
So the question is, to your point, which is the right one for me? And again, depending on points, like when I look at this War Scroll standard, it's a good War Scroll. It's a good War Scroll. Does it fit my army? Do I have the points? Is it worth it? Is it taking over things that I wanted to do? That's the question. And maybe if you're not running another unique war, like a War Master, you don't want Krittok to take over as your general's regiment. So in that reason, I wouldn't take him.
Yeah, I think he's very niche. I think you need either to really want that wounds, a +1 to wound, or you're trying to do some War Master trick. The issue is he's not a priest and he's not a wizard. And you only have so many characters that you want to take in your army because everyone has to drop. So I think you'll see him well applied a very small percent of the time. But I don't think you'll see him a ton because he's not a priest, he's not a wizard.
I think
you have to remember that every character we look at gets compared to a 120-point Gracier that casts on 3d6.
And that's my point about small heroes. You've got a lot of good heroes. The Master Molder, the Gracier, just to name a few, like the Arch Warlock and things like that. I guess for those people who are tapping into Storm Vermin, right? And you might have reinforced them, or even an unreinforced unit. They've got a decent a profile. The anti-charge with the extra rend really does make it tasty. They've got a great little ward ability, which gives that 5-up within combat range. That's like a nice little, because this hero doesn't have a ward. So Krittok would have a 5-up ward if it was bodyguarding with the Storm Fiend. It's a Storm Vermin.
Yeah, but they don't get it.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah. No, sorry. I mean, like Krittok doesn't have it here, right? So you could give Krittok 5-up, but are you over investing into this support hero?
The other issue with it is so I ran 40 Storm Vermin, and they were not bad. One of the things I really found, the original list had a bell, and the reason it went out is because it made me play like a bubble. And I don't want to play the Storm Vermin like a bubble. I want 1 through one nozzle at one angle, 1 through another nozzle at another angle, sort of jumping around. Because I only move 6, right? But you're not, I don't think this book is a setup, at least right now, to play an effective, hordes of infantry in a mobile castle army. And that's where Krittok would work well, because he affects the whole bubble. But if instead you want those storm vermin dispersed, it gets hot. It's harder to get value out of foster competition.
So what I'm hearing is to find War Scroll, probably a niche in regards to, do you take it? Definitely not an auto include, but it could play a role. But it is competing with a bunch of other small heroes that probably are going to be a higher priority than Krittok.
I think so.
Average.
It's very cool and it's very unique. And I think this is one of the ones where, like, at some point, it will become the point value where it's worth taking and you'll see it. Because it has its own cool, unique rule set. But my guess is that out of the gate, the power of these abilities will be pointed fairly aggressively, and then it will struggle compared to little cheap utility characters.
What would be a fair price for you to bring Krittok in if you were going to consider?
Like, I mean, a Warlock is 170. And that's giving you CP economy and a caster, so it'd be hard to pay more than that. Reputation for Cunning is super tempting, but it also is CP inefficient. So somewhere around 170, I'd like seriously consider and maybe be excited about.
But yeah, I'm thinking about the value of the reputation of Cunning, because you called it out right at the top of the show that this ability moving in the enemy hero phase is worth its weight in gold. Being able to do 2 of them, could that be even better? Is it worth it? I think the answer is you need to decide, folks. It's a very niche unit.
Yeah. If you take it, and you think about, you're not going to use reputation Cunning in return, because when it will come up will be mainly when you, because 2 different units, it's not the same unit twice, and so it will be when reputation for Cunning allows you multiple angles of tactic denial, and those times it may be really, really good, but it will still be really CP hungry when you use it.
Yeah.
Because I think that was the 2 main things. Sorry, that's my favorite part of the book is the opponent always 3 class steps ahead. Favorite ability of the book. Biggest thing about the book is CP constraint.
Yeah.
And so you got to balance that.
You've got to have a really good plan and build. Or if you're going to take this Krittok, it's not just chuck it in your list because you've got the spare points. I feel like you've really built a plan around it. It's independently, it's a good War Scroll, but it doesn't suit everybody. And if I had an existing Skaven list, it just doesn't automatically go into that list and does its thing. You've really got to build around it.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts? It's a bloody cool model, I'll give it that much. Even if I wasn't running Krittok, that is a very cool model.
Yeah, absolutely.
This model that got leaked, I remember very early on, and got very leaked, and we were all like, what on earth is this model? Welcome to the Brood Terror. So it is a monster. It is a molder, to no surprise. Move of 6, save of 5, control of 5, health of 12. It has a shooting profile and 2 combat profiles. Shooting profile is 15 inches, 2d6 attacks, hits on 4s, wounds on 2s, rend 1 for d3. The weapon profile, the chain flail certainly is quite spicy. 4 attacks, hits on 4s, wounds on 2s, rend 2 for 3 crit mortals, as well as some other attacks under the bladed limbs. 2 key abilities. The first one is regenerating terror. At the end of any turn, heal d6 this turn. Then you also have the Warpstone Fumes Rampage. So in the combat phase, roll a dice on a 2+. For the rest of the turn, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by enemy units while they're within 6 inches of this unit.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a real challenge of a unit to take, because it's going to hit that very limited amount of support piece slot. And I think that when you're taking him, you get a little bit of melee, you get a little bit of shooting on a medium-sized monster. The healing is really nice. I think you're taking him as something to stand either to corner charge or to be behind lines to use Warp Storm Fumes. I think the most important part of this war scroll is that combat phase abilities don't require you to be in combat. And so this is a big debuff piece that has moderate melee value and it isn't squishy because it's going to heal up. But it's not like a frontline tank. It's like a utility piece with some strength. I worry about pieces like this because it does a little bit of everything, that it will be, this is one of the ones where like you're guessing the points. Like if it's pointed aggressively, I'm not super excited about it. But I do think that Warp Storm Fumes on its own is a worthwhile ability to consider inclusion at the right price.
I think the challenge for me with the Brood Terror is it's competing with the Hell Pit Abomination. Now, assuming that the points were the same, what would I take? Would I take the Brood Terror or the Hell Pit? I think personally right now I'm taking the Hell Pit. But to your point, it has a shooting attack that the Hell Pit doesn't have. It has less health, has more consistent move. It has the debuff piece, but you've got the regeneration if you roll high enough on the passive Hell Pit ability. Like I'm just looking at the two wall scrolls side by side and assuming the points are similar.
Yeah.
I think I still got, other than it's a bloody cool model, it's a very interesting model. I think I'm still going Hell Pit if the points are similar value.
I think so. If they're similar value, I think they have very different roles. Like they're both monsters, but the Hell Pit is a melee monster and the Brood Terror is a utility monster. And I think if you're thinking about it for anything but a bot for Warp Storm and Fumes that has other stats, it's going to be inefficient, and the Hell Pit will outclass it. So you really have to be like, I want that -1 to hit.
I guess the question is do you need the utility? And that's why I probably lean more into the Hell Pit, because like I'm comparing them because they are both monsters, they're both Molder, they have commonality. Yes, they're very, very different, but I think the role of the Hell Pit is much clearer. And I'm like, yep, I know what it does it really well. Go do your thing. The Brood Terror, it is a jack of all trades, and it's definitely got more tools than the Hell Pit, but it doesn't have a clearer role. So you've really got to think about what you want to do with it.
The other thing I would think, so I think the role is make your infantry more durable. I think the issue with it is, like, say if you instead compare it to 40 clan rats, if it's about the same points as 40 clan rats, that -1 to hit is going to make your 40 clan rats more durable, but you're probably better off with 40 more clan rats.
How would you use it?
Huh? How I would use it would be I would sit behind lines of clan rats or storm vermin that were wholly within 5.5 inches of it, and I would sometimes countercharge, or I would sometimes wait for them to bounce off of me and then charge it the next turn. But mainly, I would be using it sort of as a bubble piece for 1 or more infantry units, which is, I think, what it does. I don't know. I think you're right to say, like, does the army need that? I think the army does need minus to hit and wound debuffs on your opponent because the saves are relatively bad. And so that is your primary method of getting durability. But, this is only in combat. It's on a 2-up. It forces you to bubble where you want to be going everywhere. I think it will be hard to make it efficient. I just think that's what its role is if you're taking it.
Yeah, I can see it working nicely behind a unit of, say, Storm Vermin, especially like, soak up the charge. You're getting the +1 rend being anti-infantry or anti-charge. You've then got this Brood Terror behind it, giving you -1 to hit. So you're making this nice little castle. But how many points are you spending on the vermin, Storm Vermin, plus the Brood Terror, then potentially a hero that might be supporting, whether it's Krittok or someone else? Are you now in that 1/3 of your army territory with that little combination? And is that worth it to you? It's a nice little independent piece as well, knowing it's got a little debuff aura. But I think, to your point, it probably works as a synergistic piece how you make the most of it is going to be up to you. I think
the other thing is it has to compete against the bell, because to me it's much more similar in role. Like I wouldn't compare it to a help, I compare it to a screaming bell.
Yeah,
because I think that's the role they both do, and the bell has more wounds, a ward save, doesn't heal, and is double caster in addition to the -1 wound aura. So I think it's going to be hard pressed to see play. I think we agree for different reasons. It's going to be hard pressed to see play.
Yeah. I think, again, I think my advice is definitely buy it if you want to buy it. But I think the key is going to be the fact that have a plan. Have a plan. Obviously, it's just not independent. It's not just like Helping Abomination you just chuck into your list and it does its thing. I think this one needs a little bit more support and love and thought on how you tap into this. All right. Brutera, thank you for your time. Certainly interesting. I want to see your points. I think one of our last units. Oh no, I think we've got a few more units left. We have the Warplock Galvaneer. So you've got another hero on foot. You've got movement of 6, save of 5, control 2, health 5. You've got a ranged weapon. Sorry.
Can we skip this and do it after the Scourgers?
Sure.
Because it's hard to value without knowing that war scroll.
All right.
Sorry.
Let's go with the guest. So we've got the Warpvolt Scourgers, which is one of our new. It is our new War Machine team, weapons team. So you've got the Warp Scourger, which is 15 inches, 2d6 attacks, hits on 2s, wounds on 4s, rend 1 for 1. It's anti-cavalry with +1 rend, and it has crit 2 hits. It has one ability, which you all probably know. It's the Hidden Weapons team. I'm probably not going to read it out to you. It's pretty consistent across all of the weapons teams. Health 3, so I think the box has 3 in the box. So I only assume it's very similar to the other weapons team. Again, that's on the pitch battle profile. What are you thinking here, Matt?
I think it's only 3 inches less than the new base range of the Jezzails, which means its covering fire is only 3 inches less. And it hits on 2s, which means its covering fire is hitting on 3s with crit hits 2s, which means effectively the same math as hitting on 2s for covering fire. 21 shots on 3 of them compared to Jezzails being 6. And it can be out of visibility. So I think there's a real use for this unit sitting behind Clan Rat, sitting behind your line, because it's output and covering fire, and move 6, range 15, you're still going to get to shoot stuff. It's pretty killy. I guess the basics, that's like 21 shots on 2s with auto 6. That's 21 hits. That's 10 damage to rend 1, rend 2 to cavalry. Jezzails, you're looking at a little less than that. Is that right? You're looking at 4 damage and then 6, 4. I guess you're looking at 10. So the Jezzails are doing about the same damage for shooting, but less damage when doing covering fire. I think that what makes me nervous about this guy is it does want to be closer up to your back line. It doesn't have shooting combat, and it has a 6-up save. And the 3-inch combat range means that in 4th edition, as compared to 3rd, something can hit your lines with something else. If your front line gets popped by 1 unit, the 2nd unit can very easily get in, engage, and hit these guys. And so they're going to be really finicky to effectively keep alive. But their damage output seems really cool.
They play really well into the current meta. And we talked about it earlier in the show. You're seeing a lot of cavalry, a lot of armies are building around cavalry. This is a nice little piece, but you make a really good point, and that is you've got to put them into a greater piece of risk. where Jezzails can backboard and shoot till their heart's content. If you really want to make the most of the Warpvolt, you've got to get them closer to battle. So if I was going to invest in this and maybe even reinforce them, I'm probably taking 40 clan rats rather than 20, because 20 is just too great of a risk that you're going to get into them, and it's hard to protect them with, even like power through will get to them eventually. So getting them out of that combat range and threat is going to be critical. I like it. Again, price dependent. If you're someone who is not willing to invest in those 40 clan rats, then maybe Jezzails are still the best option for you. But I do like that profile, especially in the current meta. A lot of people are building into cavalry.
Yeah. I wonder how much, like, these guys theoretically come out at the same time as your initial points change. And part of the reason cavalry is so frequent right now is they are sort of a spammable unit with the initial undercosting of the change to 3 health on so much of the light cav. And so they may come out just in time for that meta to change. But I totally agree with you. Into the Red 2 into the current cav is great.
It will make you think twice, and even getting close range with cover fire, you'll reduce the damage that's coming into you. You'll make them think twice of how they use that cavalry, and maybe it's not so powerful when they charge into you. But I like it. I like the unit. It's price dependent. Good meta pick.
I also love
how risk tolerant are you getting them closer to combat is the key. Any other thoughts, Matt?
No, thanks for skipping around. It's probably a good segue to the Galvaneer. The reason I wanted to do it first is because of the Lightning Master ability on the Galvaneer.
So speaking of the Galvaneer, we're back. Take 2 Galvaneer. No, it was a really good context as well, because again, this is a support piece. It does have a Warpvolt Obliterator, similar ability, 18 inches, so it's a little further. 2 attacks, hits on 3s, wins on 3s, Ren 2 for D3, anti-cavalry, crit 2 hits. I'm not going to talk about the Rusted Blade. The Rusted Blade is the Rusted Blade. 2 key abilities. First one is Lightning Master. Once per battle in the shooting phase, pick a friendly Warpvolt Scourgers unit that's in combat range with this target. Roll the dice on a 2+. Set the attacks characteristic of the Stormvolt Scourgers to 10 for the rest of the turn. The second ability is more Warpvolt Doom. Any shooting phase, pick an enemy unit that has had any damage points allocated to it this turn by attacks made by a Warpvolt Obliterator to be the target, which is the weapon profile here. Roll a d3 for each other enemy unit that's in the target's combat range. On a 2+, inflict a number of mortal wounds equal to the dice roll.
Yeah, so the real question is okay, so Lightning Master, this is on a reinforced unit of the, what do they call the Scourgers?
The Warpvolt Scourgers.
Yeah. And you're talking about plus 18 attacks that you're getting once per game. And so, I mean, it's roughly time and a half the DPS on that unit once per game. And so that's pretty good. It's you're going from 7 to 10. It's your shooting phase, so you can't do it with covering fire, but 1.5 DPS is a pretty big unit buff, even if it's a little less than that. And the more Warpvolt Doom combined with a pretty decent shooting profile, if you compare, this guy's shooting profile is about 1 Jezzail, so that's 50 points of shooting. Then you have the more Warpvolt Doom. If that goes off, say, once, you got 2 more mortal wounds. That's maybe another 30, 40 points of shooting. And then you've got your Lightning Master ability. And so I think at the right price, even though this guy is not a wizard or priest, you would take him with a reinforced unit of the Scourgers, because it can be a lot of DPS per point.
Yeah, you're not taking him in the average Skaven list. It's just you're not chucking him in. But if you're going to take those Scourgers, and we just talked about the value of the Scourgers, although adding this hero then just adds an extra target on the heads of the Scourgers. if your opponent is smart, but hopefully you obliterate them in the face before they've realized that. It's a good unit. It's nice. Definitely something I wouldn't put into any unit. The Lightning Master is what you want to make the most of. Obviously, 2d6 attacked, the average is a 7, so you're getting consistency here, but you're not getting the spike. But my God, a reinforced unit of Scourgers hitting on having 10 attacks each.
60 is great. 60 hits.
Consistently, 60. Do the mass hammer. You know what's going to come out of this.
The great news is that's 60 hits, which means it's 30 wounds, and Ren 2 into Cav, and Cav tend to be about 30 wounds.
Yeah, that Varangard unit coming for you might reconsider might reconsider hitting your line.
Very
Anything
cool.
else? Like, it's a cool unit.
Cool. Yeah.
But you're not going to chuck it into our average Skaven unit. No. But it again, as a war scroll, it's a good war scroll, but does it fit your style and your build and what you need?
I think that's really true for most of these, which is good, right? All these new things are like situational. They're build dependent. They're not. I don't think we've hit one thing that's an auto take, which is good.
Yeah, they're all good. I think Vizzik is probably the one that is the easiest to lift and shift into any lists.
Yeah.
But all of these other smaller units or support heroes, it's and this goes back to what we said earlier. Skaven, yes, you can spam something, but I think you're better off tapping into multiple parts of the book or multiple different units and really getting the most of the various things that you offer, because there's so many cool things in this bloody book. I think this is the last one. I think this is the last new unit, which is the Warp Grinder, which, from my understanding, the weapons team, the new kit, it's I don't actually know. I should know, but it looks like it's a multi-kit, so you build what you want, whether it's the Scourger or the Grinder. But what have you got here? So you've got no shooting attack. It's much more a melee focus. You've got your D3 Drill Fang, 4s, 2s, 3, 5 damage. That was not a typo. That surprised me when I went, holy sh! 5 damage. And then you got some teeth and claws. 2 key abilities. First one is a deploy ability. So pick this unit and up to 1 friendly non-monster Skaven unit that's not been deployed. Set it up in reserve, and it's going to be tunneling. And then you've got the other side of that, which is the Warp Ambush. So in your movement phase, pick this unit if it has not tunnel. If it's in the tunnel below, then pick an enemy unit more than 6 inches from all other enemy units to be the target. Roll a dice on a 4+. Set up this unit within 3 inches of the target and more than 6 inches from all other enemy units. Then set up this unit that was in the tunnels below with this unit within 3 inches of the target, more than 6 inches from all other enemy units. What on earth is this?
It's very cool. It's very, very cool. But
it's so Skaven. That's what I expect with Skaven.
Here's the thing. 3 inches away is amazing, but they have to be isolated. And so if you invest a ton of points into the unit that goes down with this, they're just never going to have a unit be alone. And you're going to just sit below ground with this. And it's not going to be able to actually come up. Now, that constrains them a lot, depending on their army. But you could overinvest in this and get a lot stuck below ground. And so I think this is like the one reason that I would ever take an unreinforced unit of Storm Vermin, because that's like 140 points. You get 30 attacks on 3s and 4s. They're not going to kill something big, but an isolated unit at Ren 2, they're going to wipe. And so if you can come up 3 away and get that guaranteed charge, then your opponent has to know that at any point, any isolated unit is going to get hit by the Warp Grinder attacks, which may do 2 million damage or 0, and 10 Storm Vermin. And that is, obviously depending on points, but like that is a really good way to mess with how they have to move about the board.
I tell you what, I was thinking about it. I was thinking a unreinforced unit of rat ogres.
I think that's the other. I think it probably depends on like what sub-faction buffs you're leaning into. Storm vermin do more damage per point than rat ogres.
Really? I haven't done the maths, but
they don't look nearly as impressive. But the attack volume means that like the DPS per point's higher. But you're basically taking an unreinforced unit of whatever glass cannon is most effective, right?
Hmm.
But I think we're on the same angle. Like, what can I take that's just killy?
Yeah, like it's not clan rats. Storm vermin, yes. Although when I think of storm vermin, I'm thinking about receiving the charge, but I see the volume of attacks coming into play. So, like, obviously a good option.
They get +1 to Ren in their sub-faction on the charge.
Yes.
So they're Ren 2 on the charge, Ren 2 and receiving a charge. If you're running them in a meaningful numbers.
Ah, yes. Here I am knee deep in War Scrolls. Not even thinking about sub-faction stuff, right? I guess then you choose the sub-faction.
But that's why I'm saying you're probably right. The rat ogres are a very similar role if like the buffs in your army are more centered around the Molder sub-faction. But either way, we actually went exactly the same place, which is you take an unreinforced DPS unit and you say, please spread out. Oh, you don't want to? Cool, I haven't invested that much in it.
It's funny that we have the same approach. We just take it very differently, but we still find ourselves, in a very similar. And again, like, none of them is better or worse. It's to pick your flavor. But I'm thinking about this, right? Going, okay, I've got this Warp Grinder who can tunnel. I've got my Gnaw Holes for movement shenanigans. I now have Skitter Leap for ultimate unlimited teleporting. I then have Storm Fiends who can teleport as well with tunnel with the grinder. Is it the Grinder Fist? Yeah, the Grinder Fist. The amount of terror that you can use in the movement phase without recursion and things like, and the 3 claw steps ahead, you're playing 4D chess at this point. Like, you guys are on another level.
The other thing is, so we should mention it's on 4+. So the reminder is like, it's really, really you don't want to overinvest in it because you may just never get it up.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is you set up within, it's within 3 of the target.
Correct, within 3 inches, which is
so
why
I'm going to be charging. Wait, no, then set up the unit that was in the tunnels within 3. So they're not going to be charging. So
and that's why I went away from the Storm Fiends, because I'm like, Storm Fiends, because I'm like, I want them to charge or be charged.
The Storm Vermin. Yeah, I was thinking it was outside of 3. So you're right. So you're in the rat ogres, they don't care if they're charging.
I'm not right. I just like that. It's just I think our argument is still the same. Like, have something that can get in, do some damage. You don't have to worry about charging. Obviously, the 4-up, right? So I guess my question to you is, do you like the 4-up? Obviously, we don't like the 4-up, but is that gamble worth it? And would you take 2? Would you double down and improve your consistency? Yes, obviously, you're going to have 2 different units going with the Warp Grinder.
I don't think you ever take 2. I don't think you're taking it for damage. I think you're taking it to give your opponent one more problem to solve.
Would you take them? Here's an idea for you.
Okay.
Would you take them with no support? So you just like take 1, 2, or even 3 Warp Grinders. Don't take any friends with them, so you're not putting your friends at risk by not coming up. But you've got these 3 little independent pieces that on a 4-up, you tunnel, you pin someone in, you've got the redundancy there, so likelihood you're going to get at least one of them in.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Maybe you do take that way because they do what endless spells don't do anymore, which is that they block movement before the redeploy. Because since it's within 3, you can use them to redeploy block. So that's a completely different way than bringing up the DPS unit, right? Is you use it to block opponent or anything they would do at the end of your movement phase. Which also means that you could use it to block covering fire.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you take 2 or 3 without an addition, to block those abilities.
Yeah, you almost, like, again, points dependent, folks, assuming like if it's 100 points, I'm taking 3, maybe even more. If it's like 150 to 170, I'm thinking about my investment, and maybe I'm not putting multiple on the table, and maybe I'm.
It's gonna be hard. It might be 3 or 0. If you said 100, I'd be like, I'm down with 3. If you said 170, I'd be like 0. So like, when do you take 1? 120, 130? That's hard.
Because you get 3 more. Oh no, this is 1. You only get one model with this. So
I like what you now. Totally different than bringing up a unit with it. I like the idea of doing it without a unit more now, and then figuring out like, what is that worth?
Because if you want the guarantee unit, you take the Storm Fiends with the Gauntlet. Like, that's just the guarantee that you want. The last thing you want to do is have a really nice unit that's in the tunnel, and 2 or 3 consecutive turns you failed the 4-up, and by then the game's gone, and it doesn't matter anymore. That having them by themselves without a friend, and telling your opponent that you can come in within 3, you watch them change their behavior. This will mess with them.
Yeah, especially on the 4-up. Yeah, I think you take them alone.
Unless you got big grapefruits and you're like, I'm gonna go all in, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
And they're actually relatively durable. Like 8 wounds on a 4-up is not that squishy.
Yeah, 4-up, 8 wounds. It is a war machine, so it's not an infantry unit.
Right. That's very fun.
Again, price dependent. Folks, I wish I could tell you the price, the points, and it would give us a much richer conversation, but it's not in the Battletome. So I'm kind of stuck here. So with all this in mind, we are at an hour and quarter moment. Matt, here is your Oldtown Throwdown list. So you went 4-1 recently. I know you've been playing a lot of different lists and playing Skaven for a while now. This is your list, right? It was Claw Horde. You had the Kronspine Incarnate. Garcia, Clan Rats, Doomflayers, Storm Fiends, Jezzails, Warpbringer, Clan Rats, Storm Vermin. This was what it would look like. Based on what you've learnt today, would this list change? How might it change? Again, points dependent. We don't know, but like, has some things unlocked, some ideas created, some things that you wish you had, you now have access to. Talk to me more about the current list and then what the future list might look like.
So I think this list, in some ways, it didn't super work. And when I say that, the game I lost was to Ogres, and he played very well. But what I felt like in that matchup was there were too many different things on the board where my units basically were like alive or dead, just like binary life total. And I think that the reason I say that Skaven is a great book where there's just sort of like, I'm not sure the points are quite right, is because I think that you need a critical mass of Clan Rats or equivalent, and I don't think this list had that. It needed more rat hordes. When I think about this list, the Storm Fiends are still super fun. They're still super unique. The Jezzails are worse. You probably still want one. Maybe you try the Galvaneers or the Scourgers. I think that the big question, like, do you take 2 units of Storm Vermin? No, you probably take 1 and you take something else. You take the Doomflayer, not for how I took it, because I took it as a tactic spot. It doesn't do that anymore. The big question is the Warbringer versus Vizzik. And I have been thinking about this a lot. And the reason I think I would experiment with Vizzik, but the reason I'm not totally convinced is because Vizzik can't take Scurry away. And the majority of the games that I won with this list are basically based on the combination of the Jezzails and then the Warbringer being able to charge or get charged and then scurry away. Especially like being charged and scurrying away is amazing. Charging, scurrying away, and then either going back in or hitting another target, charging one unit, and then going and like hitting their Slaawn, right? Like that's probably the most powerful dynamic in the list, and you're probably not taking both him and Vizzik together.
And the denial of battle tactics when they've gone go kill the hero. Like how many times has that failed on an opponent because if that's the only one they've got or the best option, they've scurried away and that battle tactic's gone.
Yeah, and it really is intended to be a battle tactic denial list, which I find is deeply fun. It just needs more rat bodies. And so what we've added is a lot of different utility pieces. And so I don't think any of them are like automatically, oh, I've got to have this for this list. I do think that I would probably, if you took the frame of this, which is you're going to have a Grey Seer, you're going to have some clan rats, you're going to have a reinforced shooting unit. I can't imagine taking Skaven right now without one reinforced shooting unit. Maybe that Grey Seer is a Warlock now. That's now an option. You need a melee DPS unit, whether that's Rat Ogres or Storm Vermin. You have one big character slot. And so is it one of your Vermin Lords? Is it your Bell? Is it your or is it your new double prayer like Priest Vermin Lord? And so I think that your slots don't change that much. Basically, the slot in this that changes is probably that reinforced Storm Vermin, that second one. You have to pick whether or not you have a second DPS unit or more chaff or a different utility piece. And then actually the Storm Fiends is the other one. I think the Storm Fiends are too fun to give up. But basically, you've got like sort of 500 or so points floating of what do you do with them? Is it DPS? Is it utility? Is it chaff? Around your large character, your small character, your reinforced shooting, and your chaff.
We also talked right at the top of the show, the changes to the Doomflayers and the movement characteristic may make you reconsider because they certainly changed the role slightly for you on the list. So there might be some free points to move into more bodies.
I think that's just more chaff though, right? Because that's 80 points right now. So it's like
80 points.
Yeah, the one Doom player is 80 points. That's why it's there. It's 80 points to score as a tactic. So now that's going to be totally different because it was also one model with a 4-up. But it was also the tactics style model because if you pick to kill it, it goes 8 plus D6 and then plus a redeploy into a woods. Right? And so that it doesn't, as a unit of 2 that doesn't come back, that doesn't move as fast. It's cool as a unit of 2. It hits really hard. If the right points, it's still good. It doesn't do the same thing.
Yeah, and you're investing a little more into that. So
yeah, but this was not a list that I walked away being like I did a really good job with this list. I think it was fine. I think that the main value is you see the frame of like once you're going to have a big character, you're going to have a reinforced shooting unit, you need some DPS, you have to have a rat horde. Your remaining slots and points get tight.
Cool. I mean, it looks fine to me. I mean, again, you're in 4-1, but I think if people are watching this going, I'm going to run the Matt Beasley list and go take it to our next tournament, you're probably going to be rudely surprised. I would say that there was definitely more player skill onto this particular list rather than this was like the meta 5-0, you're going to crush opponents.
The other thing about this list is if you look at it, I guess the meta wrong, to be honest. If you look at it, it does buckets of Rev 2 damage, which is really good in Assault Light Grave Lords and really bad in Icon.
Word. Yep. I wasn't going to go there, but yes, it's. I guess reading the meta, seeing how things change, but again, points are going to change, rules are going to change. But I think you've made some good points around some things you might consider, might flex, you might add. I guess the other question as well is, now that we have 2 regiments of renown, how would this potentially change completely? Obviously not your particular list, but do any of these armies of renown, sorry, armies of renown. Yes, there's also 2 regiments of renown, but you don't care about that because you can't take them. But you do care about armies of renown. So there are 2 armies of renown. Don't be like me and completely miss them, because they are at the very end of the book, right after Path to Glory. So you'll find them. I completely missed them the first time I looked at the book. The first one being the Great Grand Na Horde, not to be confused with Na Hole, Na Horde. So, armies of renown. Set the scene, folks, for those who, because this is the first time Skaven's ever had one, if I remember correctly. So, with an army of renown, you are limited to what is in the army of renown. So you are essentially giving up your faction rules. So as you can see here at the top, if you pick a Skaven faction for your army, you can pick the Great Grand Na Horde, army of renown. Ignore the spelling up there. I've misspelt that one. If you do so, use the faction rules on these pages instead of your faction rules. So one of the first key things I'm going to call out here is you give up your Na Hole. No Na Hole. And you've got to have every unit from the list allocated, and that army gets the keyword Na Horde. So the units that you can pick are on the right-hand side. You can get Vizzik. You can take non-unique Master Clan, non-unique Verminous, non-unique Scryer, non-unique Molder units. You also cannot take any regiments of renown or faction terrain. So that is the force building limitations. What do you get? You get basically 1 ability and a bunch of other things, right? So you have the Disciples of Vizzik. While a friendly Vizzik is in combat range with another friendly Na Horde unit, Vizzik gets a 4-up instead of the 5-up ward. And then each time you make a successful ward roll for Vizzik, allocate 1 damage point to that friendly Na Horde unit after this battle sequence has ended. So you've boosted his ward from 5 to 4. Then you've got this interesting mechanic, right, which essentially is you get 1 of the 3 on average, but don't get too fixed on what I just said there. Frenzied Momentum, once per turn in the movement phase. This is key. You can only use this ability if you have not used any Warp Shatter Throws ability this turn. So you basically either pick either Frenzied Momentum, Unstoppable Warp Volley, or Reckless Abandon. Except the caveat, and I know I'm being confusing at this point, is that the only heroic trait you have allows you to use 2 different ones. So just keep that in mind. Back to this. And you've only got 1 heroic trait to choose from because you're restricted here. Armies of Renown, bloody hell. So if you use the movement 1, you will get +2 to run rolls and charge rolls for the target, and you subtract 1 from the target's control score. If you pick the shooting 1, add 3 inches of range to the ranged weapons, but they can't use commands. If you use the combat 1, add 1 to the attack characteristic of the melee weapons, and add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks that target the friendly units. Matt, I've just given this massive monologue. I should probably go for an electorate and be a politician with that type of monologue. Thoughts so far of the Great Grand Na Horde?
I think that Disciples of Vizzik, you're taking 1 in 6 less damage on Vizzik to do 3 times that much damage to something else. It's okay. It's not amazing. I think that the big stuff is that giving up recursion across your army for these bonuses is pretty rough. And so you're going to have to design something very specific to make it work. I think generally, if you really wanted to experiment with this, there's some more rules on it. But I think generally, if you want to experiment with this, it's because you want to not take Hordes of Wrath. You want to take a bunch of toys that don't come back anyway. And then maybe these abilities matter more for you. So if you want to take a bunch of different war machines, if you want to take a bunch of characters of war machines, if you don't want to play sort of the default model of Skaven, then you have a different ability set that doesn't rely on recursion. I don't think you take it for Disciples of Vizzik. I don't think that's an effective like power play. I think you're doing this for unit variety, like non-traditional unit variety.
Do you like the 3 Warp Shatter throws? I mean, like, I think they're quite good. I mean, getting +2 to run rolls, +3 inches to range weapons, +1 attack. Yes, there's a negative that you can't use a command, or your reduction in control score, or you giving your opponent +1 to hit against that friendly unit. But it's a nice little buff piece that you can choose, but you can't take all 3. There's going to be a choice here.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, you know, putting Frenzy, Momentum, and Reckless Abandon on a reinforced unit of Rat Ogres is pretty good. It's just it just makes a completely different style of army, right? Like, you can do this for a bunch of war machines. You could do this. You could do this for, Rat Ogres do come back is the problem. And so I think the problem is that you're playing an army where all the things are either, if they can come back, are pointed that way. And so it's going to be hard. Like, if you're doing that, there's probably other armies to run that are more effective in that style. And the only exception I can think of is you want to take a bunch of the fun toys that don't come back anyway, and so you want to give them some buffs.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you do give up your faction terrain, you give up 3 claw steps ahead, you give up Skitter Leap. Oh, by the way, I should go to the other stuff. So you also get 1 heroic trait, 1 artifact, 1 spell, 1 prayer, 1 manifestation. So based on my understanding, you would either choose the manifestation law here, summon Vermintide, or you still can choose the manifestation laws that are the universal ones. There's no reference here to say you can't choose the universal ones like Morbid Conjuration or Primal, but you wouldn't get access to the other Skaven manifestations because it's restricted here. So you basically get 1 or others. Your heroic trait allows you to tap into 2 of those warp shatter throws except for 1. Great. You have a way to do some recursion. So through the artifact, the icon of the Great Total Supremacy, once per battle, you can return D3 slain models to each friendly Horde infantry unit up to a health characteristic of 3. You have a spell, Deafening Frenzy. You have a prayer, Reverberating Ritual. Yes, the spell casting value is 8. It's very, very high. You do get a nice little benefit, strike first, but they can't take any commands. I think Armies of Renown, and I'll let Matt kind of summarize his thoughts here, but Armies of Renown mostly are meant to be a fun narrative way to build your force. They happen sometimes to be competitive, like King Broad Stomp in 3rd edition, but I think for the most part, when you look at all of the Armies of Renown, probably 80% of them or 90% of them were narrative fun and not that competitive. Anything you'd want to add or maybe challenge me on this one? Like, it's fine.
I think that's right. I think there's 2 reasons I could see doing this and they're both kind of fun. One is, you love Skaven, you want to play Skaven models. You don't like movement shenanigans, tricksy, recursion, control, little bits here, little bits there. You want to play aggro. Great, take 3 reinforced units of Rat Ogres, they all got +2 to run and charge and +1 attack. And then +1 attack every other turn. The other reason is, we've asked GW for a long time to have a dozen Doom Wheels. You can put 14 Doom Wheels in this list, and 3 of them get +3 inch range, and you don't care that they can't come back because they couldn't come back anyway. So maybe this is the Doom Wheel subfaction.
Well, and you can give them +3 to their pile-in. That's quite nice. If you get the prayer off. Look, there's some fun things here. It's not super competitive. I probably wouldn't recommend you take this to a tournament unless you're super passionate about it. But at least it's a nice little interesting way to build your force.
Totally.
Any other comments about the Great Grand Horde, Horde?
I'm just waiting for someone to build some list that like somehow breaks the abilities on the previous page that we missed. I don't see it, but maybe.
Could you run an all Vermin Lord list? Like, could it be like King Broad Stomp, where it's like because they're not unique, are they? Are they unique?
No, they're not unique.
So you could basically do like a King Broad Stomp where you've got Vizzik and a bunch of Vermin Lords, Master Clan.
And they don't come back either, and they don't get claw steps away because they're not infantry, or they're monsters, not infantry, so they can't opponent hero phase move. And so your Vermin Lords now get, but these bonuses, I guess +2 to charge. The bonuses don't help them that much though.
+1 attack characteristic, +3 range. I mean, like
they're like
Deceiver.
They're like 6 or 7 attacks each with like 2 damage, 3 damage. So they just get.
You can't take the Deceiver because it's Eshin. Anyway, my point is, you could run a whole bunch of Vermin Lords and a bunch of Doom Wheels and have an absolute bloody great time. I'm now talking myself into this, but mostly this is not competitive. But do it, and if you run an all Vermin Lord list under this, please tweet me or at me or something because I want to see it. All right, the last Army of Renown. Maybe this one's a little better. Spoiler: it's Thanquol and Friends. It is Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie. Same deal. You've got to follow this particular rule set. You give away all of your Skaven stuff. To build Thanquol's Mutated Menagerie, you can choose from Thanquol on Bone Ripper, Master Molder, Rat Ogres, Hellpit Abomination, Brood Terror, Storm Fiends, no Regiments of Renown, or Faction Terrain. It's basically Molder, right? Is this basically Molder without Molder? You're giving up Molder rules. What do you get? You got Monstrous Entourage, where a friendly Thanquol unit is in combat. It has a combat range with another Mutated Menagerie. Kind of basically the same rule. You get the 4-up ward, and you can basically bodyguard and allocate some damage to a friendly unit. You have more mutation. Once per turn, pick a friendly non-hero Mutated Menagerie unit to be the target. You can't pick the same unit more than once per battle. For the rest of the battle, add 2 to the health characteristic, add 2 to the movement characteristic, add 1 to the attack characteristic, add the target has a 5-up ward, and then at the end of each turn, allocate D3 + 2 damage points to the target. It's basically like a suicide model. You then have 2 really big rampages, and you'll see that I've had to shrink down the text quite significantly. I might let you just read that out, read that yourself instead of story time with Coach. But what are your thoughts so far? I mean, you've got some interesting double rampage here, right? Which gives you an extra rampage, which is delicious.
But the rampages kill you.
That's true. All right. Well, I will read them out then. Actually, in that brief moment, I forgot. It is hilarious. So pick a friendly non-hero Mutated Menagerie monster that has not used the Rampage ability just yet. So this is Spiteful Swarms first. If the unit has strike, so this unit has strike first for the rest of the turn. However, at the end of the turn, this unit is destroyed. When this unit is destroyed, before it is removed from play, roll a dice. For each enemy unit within 6 inches, on a 3-up, subtract 1 from the attack characteristics of the enemy unit, melee weapons for the rest of the battle. After this ability has been resolved, it cannot use any other rampage abilities for the rest of the turn. The other one is same deal. Unit has strike first, however, it is destroyed after it does its thing. When this unit is destroyed, before it's removed from play, roll a d3 for each enemy unit within 6 inches. On a 2+, inflict that number of mortal damage to the enemy, and then can't do another rampage. All right, so you got 2 suicide bombing monsters.
So I think I was trying to think about what you would do with this, and I think the answer is I don't think you need most of those roster options. The only thing you do with this is you spam Hellpit Abominations. And the reason is because you can give them a 5-up ward or your +1 attack. Probably the 5-up ward, because I think they have pretty high volume attacks. Yes, they have 13 attacks.
13 attacks.
So 1 Hellpit Abomination per turn gets a 5-up ward. They take D3 + 2 damage per turn, but they 5-up ward it and they heal back D6. So You neutralize that out. Once per turn, you add a 5-up ward to a Help Abomination. And then the additional rampages, you only use them when you expect the Help It to go down anyway. And then it also might get back up. And so I think this is like, I would like to spam Help It Abominations. Please make that fun and marginally effective. And that could be good. I don't think it's like all of a sudden, amazing, but I think that could be like legitimately interesting to put 6 Help It Abominations in the list with a couple characters.
Yeah. That's definitely how I would probably build it. I don't know why I'd put Storm Fiends. I mean, look, maybe non-reinforced units of Storm Fiends getting the +1 attack characteristic, 5-up ward. I don't care about the D3+2 damage. Hopefully, actually no, I would, because if I'm taking it every phase, it's every phase, right?
At the end of each turn. Yeah, so it has
to be at the end of the turn. Which is fine. If at the end of the turn, that's fine. You could do MSU Storm Fiends, just go in and smash, not reinforced. And then you've given them +2 health, you've given them +1 attack, and a 5-up ward, and it's almost like waves, potentially. But I like your idea better. Help It Abominations. Don't automatically use that rampage, but as they start to get close to dying, switch it out, use the Spiteful Swarms or the Rampaging Demise, and then come back.
The other thing is, like, maybe this is the one use case where you take 1 Brood Terror. Like, say Help It Bomb is on a pretty big base, right? So you get a Brood Terror, and then you sort of have 1 Help It Bomb here, 1 Help It Bomb here. They're all -6 to hit. It's turn 2. The 2 Help It Bombs both have a 5-up ward, right? Like, it's just going to be like fun Monster Mash stuff. I think it's probably actually more competitive than the last Army Renown. I don't know how good it is, but I think you could do some fun Monster Mash stuff here.
Yeah, this is definitely the one that I prefer. I mean, I guess the question is, like, if you're building around mostly Molder, you're giving up price creation. So is it worth it? But I guess every turn on one of those Help It Abominations. It now has a 5-up ward. You don't have to worry about rolling a 5 or a 6. It's just automatic. You're going to be taking damage, but you're always healing anyway. So probably really need to get a couple of Master Molders into that list. But I think this could be interesting and fun.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's other rules as well we haven't talked about. There's the heroic trait, there's the artifact, there's a spell law, there's clearly no prayers, you've got no priests, and you do get access to the Warp Lightning Vortex. The heroic trait's fine. You can use all-out attack, all-out defense, even if it was used. They can use all-out attack, all-out defense, even if the command had been used by a friendly unit this phase. What else you got? You got the Warpstone Innards, which pick a friendly non-hero mutated menagerie monster and +1 attack characteristic. However, they can take some more damage. Again, goes back to the Help It Abomination. And then you've got a spell that plays into... It's a big spell. For each damage point allocated to the target, more mutation, add 1 to the control score. And it's unlimited.
That one's interesting, right? Because, if you've got 10 wounds on Help It, all of a sudden it's control 15. That's interesting. But
and then
you're taking a lot of casters here.
And then you just don't want to do the rampage where it dies, right? Because you want it to survive even with that. You just don't want it to. And obviously, if you've already tapped into the mutation piece, it's going to take damage anyway. So it's that torn battle.
But in some ways, I think they've done a good, like, they've made these Armies of Renown sort of fun, like ways to play fun stuff, as opposed to Broad Stomp, where you're like, oh, all right, well, fine. We'll see that every game. And so I think these are probably more successful rules for Armies of Renown than Broad Stomp was.
To be fair, I'm going to defend Gargans here for a second. I've got like 5 models, 6 models to choose from. Like, back off, Matt. Like, let's back off. It's like Stormcast. It's like the Stormcast Dragon list, right? Where you're playing into a certain build. It plays into the style. It simplifies your decisions and it does things really well. But it's certainly look. I actually think, yeah, you're right. Thanquil's Mutated Menagerie is probably the stronger of the two. But I think I still like the general rules. I think just general faction rules.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's to bring it back to is like the general faction rules haven't changed with this book, and they were really cool in the first place. They're very, very cool. And I think it, to me, what's holding it back is the ability to take critical mass of rats with the utility pieces you want, but the actual movement plus recursion plus tactic denial, it's heavily interactive, heavily varied, very, very cool book.
Any final comments, thoughts? I mean, obviously, we are almost at the 2-hour mark, and as much as I would love to get Matt's thoughts on the overall faction rules and dig into favorite choices, I mean, you've obviously seen one of the examples of the lists that you'd run lately. You talked about Scurry Away, you talked about Foulhide and things like that. I'd love to get deep into the rules, but we're here till Christmas, so maybe not today. But is there any other thoughts, advice, things that you've learned, consider anything you want to wrap us up with?
I think what you said at the beginning is also right, that because it's not really a book that leans towards spamming, it's not obvious what will work yet in the same way that it becomes very evident, some of the cow spam options in the game. And so I don't feel like looking at these war scrolls, I don't feel like I immediately have a solve for what makes sense to take. I don't immediately be like, oh, you should go buy and do this. And I kind of think that's a good problem. Like there's a lot of stuff to experiment. I think I would encourage people to think through the combos and think through how they want to play, and just keep the framing of be careful to you got to have your vegetables. You can't just have toys in general to play this army successfully. You need to have a critical mass of your infantry to support your other stuff. And so you're going to have to select which toys you want to test at a time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's one of the challenges with lists, books like this and Stormcast, where you've got a really deep roster. It's very easy to be looking over the fence like, okay, right, I built a lot of Molder stuff. Oh, but I really like this piece. So maybe I go into, I don't know, a little bit of Eshin, and you're like, okay, well, actually no one's got Eshin, but you get my point. You go into Master, you go into another area, and then you start, you're going around forever trying to build a list, and you're tweaking constantly. It's having those vegetables, whether it is Rat Ogres, Storm Fiends, Storm Vermin, Clan Rats, really tapping into that infantry piece, and then building around it with your proteins and your potatoes, or running just a whole bunch of vermin lords in the menagerie. No, not the menagerie, the Vizzik one. Yeah.
The Grand Nahord.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see the new builds. They're definitely not competitive. They're not 5-0 lists or 4-1. But if you do, it means you're a bloody genius, and you've worked your ass off for it.
Yeah.
Speaking of working our asses off, something I should have said at the start of the show, but I didn't. Obviously, Games Workshop did send me the book. Thank you. Acknowledge, appreciated. I didn't get anything. I just got the book, and they're not going to see this video. And also, if you're thinking about buying Skaven, you're thinking about picking up some of the new units, you want to support the channel, affiliate links down below. Warpfire Minis USA, Element Games UK, Gap Games in Australia. Help it out. Keep the vegetables on my plate. As Matt made that random food comment, I haven't had lunch yet. But anyway, I appreciate all the support. And any final thoughts or comments, or what are you most looking forward to playing with the new book?
Oh, experimenting with Vizzik, trying to figure out how to make him just really valuable. It's going to be fun.
I tell you what I really appreciated. Now, this is a good book, and obviously Skaven people are going to go buy it anyway. But it's got a lot of really good lore here. Some really good. It is a beautiful book. Some really interesting Path to Glory rules, and we're obviously recording 24 hours after the Nova reveal. And what's really interesting is they've also mentioned essentially a General's Handbook equivalent for narrative play coming. So this Path to Glory and whatever is coming with that, it's got some really good rules in there. So I would highly recommend you check it out. I'm looking forward to see what they do with other armies with books like this. But if this is the start, I think we're in a good spot. But points dependent, obviously. Look out for Warcom whenever that happens to be. Any shout outs? You want to say hello to your Dimensional Cascade friends or your Team America friends, or if people want to chat to you, where can they find you? Wrap us up. Bring us home.
Yeah, no, actually, you made me think of one more thing I do want to say, which is this is the first release of the new edition. And the biggest risk that I had coming into the edition was that immediately every book released would make all the indexes look bad, and every book released would break the game in a way where we had to wait 3 months for it to be patched. And I don't see that happening with this. I think they did a really good job of the first book not being all of a sudden over the top. And so I think that's to GF's credit. Like, the indexes are not immediately obsolete as the book out.
Can I build on that for a second? Because Skaven Friends in 3rd edition, I remember being really underwhelmed with Skaven in 3rd edition, right? And it felt like those first couple of battle tomes really missed the mark. You know, Auric War Clans, Stormcast Eternals, you know, even Daughters of Cain to a degree, Skaven. They were the first 4 battle tomes, if I remember correctly. And it really wasn't until Maggotkin of Nurgle, which was like book 5 or book 6, that felt much more balanced, and they kind of understood the game.
Yeah.
Despite you being the first battle tome off the ranks, I don't feel the same concerns that I felt in 3rd edition. And I think this book will stand the test of times. I don't know if it's because there's no grand strategies, no battle tactics like the last book. I don't know if it's because they've simplified it and the sub-faction battle formations are not as restrictive as you had in the past, where it's like build 1, get this, build 3, get this. I just don't feel that in this current book.
Yeah, I think last edition, the first book we were talking about was dragons that were so undercosted that they were nerfed before they were actually sold as models. And this edition, we're talking about like a variety of utility units that may or may not be worth taking one of depending on your build. And that's a much healthier place to be. That's really exciting.
Yeah. And who knows what Stormcast and we know Slaves to Darkness will be the next book. So who knows how that will shift our meta, and maybe some of these armies, these units will actually be really valuable against some of the upcoming meta.
Totally. Yeah.
Who do I say hello to? Yeah, shout outs. Let's go.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to shout out my daughter, who only knocked on the door once and will definitely watch this later.
Do I ask what your daughter's name is?
Good job, Eleanor.
Well done, Eleanor. Shout out, hello. When I see you, Matt, I'll have to bring some Australian chocolates for you. Are you coming to? Have you got a golden ticket yet?
Yeah, I'll be there later.
Boom! I'm going to buy Eleanor. I'm going to bring you something sweet or savory from Australia. Matt just has to remind me. Any other shout outs? Anyone you want to say hello to?
No, I'm good. Have a great night. It was great to be on.
All right. Matt, thank you so much for your time. People, I hope you appreciated it. I hope you enjoyed this book. Go buy it. Go play with it. You'll have a lot of fun. Matt, hang on the line. But until then, let's wave goodbye. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AoS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spellcast.